Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Etsy Conversations podcast. And right before I jump into our conversation, if you enjoy the conversations you hear on the podcast and you would like to support the podcast, please go to convome.com/support, and there you'll be able to do so by buying me a proverbial coffee, which really just goes to fund everything that goes into keeping the podcast up and running. And now, on to our conversation. My guest this week is Whitney, and Whitney runs the Etsy shop Thrifty Whitney Shop, and she sells vintage home decor items specifically sourced in the Midwest. Whitney, thank you so much for being my guest and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ijama. I'm really excited to sit down and chat with you. I love talking business with other women and Etsy sellers.
Oh, yes. I'm excited to talk with you too. And I know we were chit-chatting before this. I try to hold back everything I want to say so we get the good stuff for the podcast. So as we jump into it, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up selling what you do on Etsy?
Yeah, so my name's Whitney and I live in the Kansas City area on the Kansas side with my family. I have 3 kids and a husband, and I'm a full-time mom right now.
Hey.
And so it keeps me pretty busy. And then selling vintage. So I grew up in a rural area in a small town in southeast Kansas and always went to the thrift stores, mostly out of necessity, being the oldest of 5 kids, being able to, get whatever I wanted at a cheap price. And also grew up with grandparents who collected antiques, who traveled the countryside going to antique stores. And so I was always going with them places, and grew up around a lot of what we would now call like farmhouse antiques, but it was kind of the real thing since they were living on a farm. And so kind of going back, I'm a nurse by training. And so I've been a registered nurse for a very long, over 10 years, 13 years. And in 2020, I was working part-time at a local clinic here and was furloughed. And actually it came at a good point where I was kind of burnt out, and it's really hard working, working outside the home and being a mom, as I'm sure many listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so I was furloughed for a couple months. And then when they invited me to come back to my job, I actually quit. And because we were moving into homeschooling our kids and then having another baby, and it has just got to be a bit much. And then in the spring of last year, so 2021, I had a couple friends who said that they were going to start selling vintage and stuff that they got from the thrift store on Instagram. And I've always been very active on Instagram. I love photography. I've had several accounts for different things. And so I've never though seen people selling vintage on Instagram before, and started discovering all of these accounts and started going to estate sales, which I hadn't been to for a long time, going back to the thrift store to look at things, and started finding stuff and was like, well, I'll just put it up and we'll just, one of my mottos in life is let's just see what's possible. Like, let's just see what happens, right? If it fails, it fails. It's not a big deal, but let's just see what happens. And people were buying things from my Instagram and I kind of got hooked. And one thing I've realized in reflection is that I come from a pretty long line of entrepreneurs. My mom, was home full time with us kids, but always had a side hustle, whether it was bookkeeping or helping my dad run the airport, or as my dad was a pilot and the general manager for our municipal airport.
Oh, wow.
My grandparents always ran small businesses when I was growing up. And so it's definitely kind of in my blood to do this. I just had never, I'd been a nurse since I was 19. So I'd always worked in healthcare. And so started growing my Instagram account and selling things that I was finding here in Kansas City and in my hometown. And that just grew. And it was so much fun and it was successful. And then I got to a point last that was like spring of 21. And then by the fall, winter time, I had our third baby in September, and realized that there comes a point on Instagram, because you're manually
Invoicing.
collecting payment and
Yeah.
invoicing and the shipping and everything. Like, you can only scale up so much with that, and you have to start automating some systems. So, and I had for a long time, like, I'm not going to open an Etsy shop. Like, there's all this stuff. People tell me there's these fees, and then realizing, like, actually, no, if I want to grow my income and grow my inventory, all of that, like, I need a platform that I can do that on. And so started my Etsy shop December 4th. So actually, at the time we're recording this, it's been just about a year since I've had my Etsy shop open. And yeah, so it has been overall a really, really great learning experience for me, to be selling vintage. So yeah, I focus just on vintage home decor and textiles, and sourced probably over 90% from the Midwest. So basically here in Kansas City and in a lot of rural Kansas communities that I travel to. And then just this past October, also opened up my own website on Shopify to sell.
Whitney, that is a lot. And I have so many follow-up questions. One, with selling on Instagram, I dabbled in that a couple of years ago. So I know it was really exciting for me to sell on Instagram, where, I got that direct feedback from people saying, yes, I want that, and invoice me. And I wanted to ask how you were doing it. Were you manually sending people like a PayPal invoice and then you would ship it to them, or were they Venmoing you their payments and then you were walking to the post office or driving to the post office? How did that work?
Yeah, so I would post things either in my stories or on my Instagram feed saying, this is for sale, this is how much it is, plus shipping or free local pickup. I do have several local buyers. So I have like a small group of local customers that I love they just come to my house and pick it up. So I was posting those things, like I said, on my feed or my stories saying, this is how much it is. And I took PayPal or Venmo. And then they would also they would say, okay, I want this, and this is my zip code, this is my Venmo name or PayPal. And then I would calculate the shipping for them. Yep. And people do it differently. This is how I did it, was then I would just request the full amount from them with the shipping charge and the item charge. And if they were in Kansas, sales tax for that. Okay. So then they would send it to me, and that worked really well with a certain volume. But a lot of Instagram sellers will do drops. So they'll say Monday at 7 p.m. that, I'm going to list all these things on my Instagram feed. And then you have to, there's just like a different vibe with Instagram. And I understand with bigger accounts why they do this, but it starts to feel really intense of like, if you claim something, if you say you want this, I'm going to send you an invoice right away, and you have to pay me within 15 minutes or within 30 minutes. Yeah, most people say this. And then if you don't, I'm moving on to the next person. And the reason for that is because so many people will just ghost you and not respond anymore. Yeah. Or they'll say like, I'm interested. Can you send me all these pictures and all this information on the item? Because I'm really interested. And then you do, and then they never respond to even say they don't want it, or the shipping charge might be too much and they decide they don't want it, and then you've lost a sale. Okay. Or they just get busy with life and they can't get back to you that night to send the payment or to even send you like their zip code. And so and then for me as well, like 7 p.m. on a weeknight is pretty much the worst time to be sitting at a computer trying to run shipping charges and send invoices. Like evenings around my house, like bedtime lasts like 10 hours. So that's what it feels like. Like my kids, I mean, there's people who tell me like, well, my kids are in bed by 7:30 p.m. And then I just sit down. I'm like, I'm so happy for you. Good for you. You must love your life, because My family, we are just night owls. Okay. My kids, if I have lights off by 9 p.m., I'm a happy camper. Like it just doesn't work for me. And it was
Right.
adding so much stress to my family. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I just can't. And then
Yeah.
I just feel for my buyers that it puts so much pressure on them to respond immediately. They don't have time to think about it. And I don't
Mm.
like encouraging people, especially for some of my items. You know, if I'm selling a $300 quilt, I don't like people feeling pressure to having to make a really quick decision.
Yeah.
So, and all that to say, like, there are some Instagram sellers that I love who do a great job. And this is not a judgment call on anyone else's business practices, but for me, it was just not working. And so that is kind of when I decided to looked at all the platforms, like what is the best option for me right now? And
Mm-hmm.
Etsy really seemed like the next best step for me to grow my business.
Okay. Wow. Now, you also run a Shopify store. When did you decide to roll Shopify into the mix?
So that was okay. So Etsy was in December of last year. And then I think over the summer and late and early fall, I started looking. I started looking at my numbers on Etsy.
Mm-hmm.
Like people get real emotional about fees and money in general. And I have never been one to complain about. I feel like you have always had a really, really good outlook on this. Like we are paying Etsy to market our products, you know. But I basically sat down, and I think it was in September that I sat down and looked at my numbers, and I saw that, and I can't remember if this was since December or January, but I mean, it's essentially the same thing, that I had paid $1,800 in fees to Etsy.
In a month?
No, since December or January. Sorry. So
still,
that year,
that's significant. That's almost 2K.
I was just, I know. And I was like, wow. And because in my head, I was like, oh, I can't, I've designed a few websites on Squarespace, which I love, by the way. Squarespace is probably my favorite web platform.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought like, well, I don't want to pay someone to design a website for me. Like it's so much money. And then I realized I just paid Etsy $1,800 to have my to have a shop that's not even mine. Basically rent. I just paid Etsy $1,800 in rent.
It's about how much you'd pay a web designer.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I was just, how can I? And I was like, I can no longer justify paying Etsy that much if I'm not willing to invest that much in my own business.
Yeah.
So, and then I looked at my traffic. So it was very steady that 25% of my traffic was coming from Instagram. And the thing that's hard with Etsy is you cannot see how much of that traffic is converting to sales. Like I cannot see, and that's something that Shopify does show you. That's amazing. And we can talk about that later, but 25% of my traffic was coming from Instagram. And I knew specific people who were repeat customers of mine who were buying high ticket items. So quilts that, were in the $200 and $300 range. And I was like, okay, if I just so let's assume that $1,800, so like 1/3 of that is going to be the credit card swipe fee. That's the same no matter whether you're on Shopify, Squarespace, anywhere. Like that's not going away. But then 2/3 of that, so that's $1,200, is fees that are coming from the platform fee that Etsy has. Okay, and 12. Okay, I'm not very good at math. 1,200. So divided by 4, like it's $300. That's how much a year of Shopify is $300 for a year.
Really?
And
it's what, 29, about 29 a month, right?
Yep. And if you pay for the full year, it's like 312.
Oh. Whoa.
So when I actually sat down and crunched the numbers, it's like if I simply redirect all my Instagram traffic onto my own website, that means that I'm already breaking even on whatever money that I've put into Shopify. And the more that my Instagram grows, the more that I'll be saving money on fees.
Yeah.
So I still was like, I still need to be on Etsy because I've had a lot of people find me on Etsy, and then they follow me on Instagram, or I'm still working through how to promote my website to Etsy customers without getting in trouble for fee avoidance. That's like a whole nother conversation.
Mm.
But, if I'm able to redirect those people for their next purchase onto my website, then I'm saving even more money. So I'm trying to increase my profit margins as much as I can while still almost using Etsy like a marketing funnel
Yeah.
to like introduce people to me and my brand and my shop, and
Yeah.
then hopefully getting them over to my website. So it really came down to just the numbers.
Whitney, that just blows my mind when I think about, and I know we've said on the podcast a number of times, know your numbers, but the way you just broke down yours, it's so evident. Sometimes people wonder, well, when is a good time to start my own website? When is a good time to branch out? And for you, it was clear. I mean, crystal clear when you look at those numbers and think how much, it would cost you to put the time in to figure out how to set up Shopify. Or even if you did have to pay someone to set it up, eventually you would still be paying less over time, having your own Shopify site over Etsy. Now, I have a question for you regarding getting your current customers to go to, and for anyone who wants to check out Whitney's website, it's thriftywhitney.com, and I will have links to her website, her shop, her Instagram, everything in the show notes for this episode. But if you just want to hop over there and take a look now, it's thriftywhitney.com. And I'll just quickly spell it thriftywhitney.com. Do you include, or have you considered including small mailers or flyers? You can make these at a really low cost, say like with Vistaprint, and include them in your shipments to your customers with information about your website, or even just something that says, to for 10% savings, or to for better deals, check me out at thriftywhitney.com. So people who buy from you get that in hand. I mean, who buy from you on Etsy.
Yeah. So what I have right now is on my the packing slip that prints off from Etsy. I have a line that says new items list to my website every Sunday, thriftywhitney.com. And I also do have business cards. I'm working through the last of my Etsy business cards that have like my Instagram link and everything on it. And then I have business cards that I made up for my website, because on my website, I actually offer free US shipping on orders $100 plus. But I think I will make a mailer that just has my website to include in Etsy shops. The problem is, because I was just looking at Etsy's policies regarding this, we have to be very careful how we word things that we include to Etsy customers. Like, you can't actually say, for better deals, go to my website. So with Etsy, and I think it's under house rules or whatnot. It's under fee. If you look under fee avoidance, you cannot say like, for a better deal on this item that is currently listed on Etsy, go to my website. You can't say that. So this is how I get around that. So I have my working system right now is that every Sunday night, well, now we're getting into the holidays, but generally every Sunday at 7 p.m., I list a collection of 15 to 20 new items on my website. And I list those on the website first so that they have a chance to sell to my Instagram followers and my email list, because I do have a small email list that I'm growing. And then throughout the week, I will trickle those over onto Etsy, because Etsy likes the algorithm really likes it if you're listing a few new things every day, like to keep the algorithm happy. Basically, they want to see that activity. It drives more traffic to your shop. So I cannot I can't tell people, for a better deal, buy this on
Right.
my website or for free shipping, but I can, like, you can list your website on your Etsy shop profile. There's a place to put your website in there.
Uh-huh.
And then if I'm telling people there's new items on my website on Sunday that are not on Etsy, that's okay,
Oh.
as long as that item is not listed on Etsy. So it's all about how you word it.
Yeah.
Because I do think that Etsy takes fee avoidance
Oh, for
pretty
sure.
seriously.
Yeah.
So and it's like I don't want to get kicked off.
Yes. Oh no, I get that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for
Yes.
sharing that. I'm glad I did not lead a whole bunch of people astray.
No, well, it's very subtle. Like I said, there's some nuances to how you're saying. And even if someone's
Yeah.
intention is not to mislead people, again, if you just look on the Etsy fee avoidance policy, they're pretty
Hmm.
clear, I
Yeah.
think, in what you can and cannot say.
Okay. So, when you drop them on Sunday, how long do you let them sit on your website before you move them over?
I try to give them 48 hours
Okay.
because inevitably, like this past week, I was really busy and I was like, I'm just going to list, like, I dropped things this past week, and it was a Monday night because I had some family stuff. So then Tuesday, I'm like, I'm just going to list everything. Well, then I list it on Etsy. I pay the 20 cents. And the next day, someone goes on my website and buys like three of the
Oh,
items, which is fine. It's just
yeah.
20 cents,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's fine. But I try to give it at least a couple of days
Yeah.
because I use an integration app called Sellbrite, and I
Oh,
can send you links. So Sellbrite. It's actually owned by GoDaddy. So
okay.
it's an app on Shopify. Okay,
Okay.
so Shopify and Etsy do not talk to each other.
Yeah.
So you have to have like a middleman,
Okay.
unless you want to manually copy listings over, which I do not recommend at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've
Mm-hmm.
got to have some sort of automation going on. There are a lot of apps. There's people I talk to who use different apps. I tried them out. It just didn't like click with me.
Yeah.
Sellbrite only. So basically, Sellbrite does Amazon, Etsy, eBay, Walmart. Some of them sound kind of random, but it's not like Vendu or Flip. Those are
Okay.
ones that
List
Poshmark,
Perfectly is
Mercari.
another one I've heard.
Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
the thing about Sellbrite is that it's free if you
Okay.
have under 50 orders a month from whatever platform you're cross posting to. So
Okay.
if my Shopify, okay, this is something that you really need a visual for, but there's Sellbrite for Shopify
Uh-huh.
makes so there's Sellbrite, which you can actually use without using a website. Let's say that you're on Etsy and you want to cross post to eBay, but you don't want your own website. You can use Sellbrite for that, and Sellbrite becomes your inventory hub. So
Okay.
it's like the hub, and then you have the spokes of the wheel coming out to the other platforms.
Right.
Shopify is my hub. That's where my they call it like the source of truth, which
Mm.
sounds like super cultish, but it's basically like they're tracking pricing and inventory. So how
Okay.
many items that you have. So
Yeah.
Sellbrite pulls all that information from Shopify and
Mm-hmm.
spits it out to eBay and Etsy.
Okay.
Um,
Does Sellbrite, I'm sorry,
yeah.
will they, if something sells on, say, Etsy, will
Mm-hmm.
they now deduct that or remove that listing from your Shopify
Yes.
store? Okay.
That's it. That's exactly what they do. So they're
Okay.
tracking inventory. Now, on the free plan, it does take up to 2 hours for that inventory syncing to happen. I
Ooh.
did have one time where someone bought a quilt on my website, and then 20 minutes later, someone bought it on Etsy.
What a
And I
nightmare.
and I kind of had wondered, like, is this going to happen? Selfishly, I was really glad it happened that way and not the other way, like Etsy,
Yeah.
because then the fees, I mean, on those quilts, some of the fees are like $20 to $30
Yeah.
because Etsy also charges that is like my one gripe on Etsy,
The
that they charge a
transaction fee.
fee. They charge a fee on the shipping charges.
Oh yeah.
That one time I shipped something to Australia and the shipping was the item cost $90 and the shipping was $100. And
Oh
I had to pay so much money because I had to pay the platform fee on the
yeah.
shipping. And I was like,
Yeah.
that is not okay. Sorry, I digress. Anyway, so I sent her a very apologetic message and like offered her 20% off on anything else in my shop, like any other quilt. And I just told her, like, my platform, this sold on my website, and the platform app didn't pull it off in time. It's just a
Yeah.
fluke. Anyway, but yes, you can pay to get instant syncing, and it's really not that expensive. I think it's maybe $20 a month. And if you have more than 50 orders a month on Etsy and eBay, not Shopify, not the hub, but on the other platforms, you do have to pay for Sellbrite.
Okay.
But it's still pretty reasonable. And I think if I ever were to reach that volume, I would be more than happy to pay that much.
Okay.
So basically I will list things on Shopify, and then I go into Sellbrite and create the Etsy listing. And then it posts onto Etsy. And then I do go on to Etsy, and there's just a few tweaks. Like, for example, the shipping, Etsy, because of the way that the API code is built, like they're on their back end, they do not allow outside apps to do calculated shipping. So on Sellbrite, I just have a shipping profile that's like a flat $10 or $15 fee. And then if for whatever reason I want to use calculated shipping, I just go in and edit the listing on Etsy. Anymore, I've shipped so many things, a lot of times I just know what it's going to cost. So I just do the flat fee.
Okay.
But so there's no way to make it a completely automatic. Okay. Hands off. Unless, I mean, I imagine that if you were not doing vintage, like if you have standard products, this would be very, very seamless to do. It would be way easier. But because each of mine is a one-off, it just takes. And okay, this is like the nitty-gritty. Shopify calculates shipping completely different than Etsy. And this took me like 2 months to figure out in my head. So, and this has actually been a big hang up for a lot of sellers. If you have an item that's in a box that's larger than a cubic foot, so 12 by 12 by 12 inch, Shopify will use dimensional weight. Okay, yeah. So again, on Etsy, you might go in and put like, okay, this is a 16 by 16 by 16 inch box and it weighs 10 pounds. Yeah. Because I've shipped a lot of things like that. What you don't know is that when Etsy is spitting that out to USPS for shipping rates, USPS is using dimensional weight, but they're not like telling you that.
Which one costs more?
Well, it's the same. How it's calculated. So what you don't realize is that USPS is calculating the dimensional rate for you, but you're just not seeing it. So the dimensional rate formula, which if anyone is listening to this and they have questions, please DM me on Instagram or email me. I am like more than happy to try to help people because other people have helped me so much and there's not a lot of great information. So there's like a formula, and you can if you Google UPS dimensional weight formula, this will come up, but it's length by weight by height divided by 166.
What?
Yeah. So you might have a box that if you put it on the scale, it weighs 3 pounds, but the dimensional weight is going to be 11 pounds. That's what you put into Shopify. But obviously, once that moves over to Etsy, you have to change how that's calculated.
Yeah.
So and actually though, now that I'm used to it, I prefer the dimensional weight because what that means as long as the actual weight of the item is not more than 11 pounds, it doesn't matter what the item weighs. I don't have to sit there and weigh every single item. I still do because I have to do that for Etsy, but I basically have a box size. If I have standard box sizes, I just use that same number over and over again. It actually is a much more efficient way of calculating shipping rates. So
Really?
yes, because on Shopify, again, you don't have to measure the box every time
Oh,
and weigh
right.
it. You just know, and I actually have it written down. Like I have a bulletin board and I have my box sizes written up there and I have the dimensional rate written down. So if I have a saucepan that I know is going to go in a 16 by 12 by 8 pound or a 16 by 12 by 8-inch box, I don't have to even bother weighing it or measuring the box. I just put that dimensional weight in there and then move on. But this is something that for Etsy, especially for Etsy vintage sellers, it's so hard to get our brains around.
Yeah.
And even I actually use Pirate Ship for probably at least 50% of my shipments
Oh,
because
right.
I use UPS and
Mm-hmm.
Pirate Ship integrates with Shopify and Etsy, which is another just great thing. But you don't enter the dimensional weight into Pirate Ship. You enter the dimensions and the physical weight of the items. So
Like you
it's
do for
just
Etsy.
like you do for Etsy. Yeah. But the reason that dimensional weight is so important to Shopify, I guess I didn't really mention this, is because that is what the customer is going to be charged for shipping.
Oh,
So this is why this is so important, is because you want to make sure that if you're charging customers for shipping, you want to make sure that you're not undercharging.
yeah.
And so Shopify is going to charge the customer based on the dimensional weight of the product.
Okay. But then at the end of it, do do the shipping rates come out the same or close to the same?
They do. Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's what's been so interesting. So I put my dimensional weight in there. And then if I go to Pirate Ship to buy the label,
Mm-hmm.
it's, yeah, I'm coming out even, which is the goal.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it does work.
When you use Sellbrite to cross list, say from your Shopify to Etsy, excuse me, does it put your listing immediately live, or does it
Mm-hmm.
put it into draft mode and then you can edit it before setting it to live?
It makes it live on Etsy.
Okay.
Yeah, you can save a draft on Sellbrite if for whatever reason you're not quite done.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there's some things that that need tweaked.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a way to, like on Sellbrite, when you publish it to Etsy, there you can only publish it live,
Okay. Okay.
which for me is fine because kind of my working system is because I do a lot of batch working, and so
Mm-hmm.
I publish it to Etsy and then I immediately go in and I
And
just
make your
look through
tweaks.
it to make sure that, sometimes the pictures need moved around because of how Etsy crops the photos.
Okay.
Um, or I can put on like 20 photos on my website, but only 10 on Etsy. So I might want to
Oh,
sub
right.
in, move photo, move some things around. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it goes live right away and charges your Etsy account the 20 cents.
Okay. And that was another question I had was, if Sellbrite had the capability to also cross list your item photos so you don't have to do it twice. But yes, it does. So that's a time
Mm-hmm.
saver.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really great.
Yeah. Because I know I've used some in the past where, excuse me, they would only transfer the text information and the listing information,
Ugh.
everything but the images, which is kind of a pain because then
Mm-hmm.
you're re-uploading images multiple times.
Now, I will say that when I set this up, okay, so when I moved from Etsy to Shopify, I had to export out, and I did this. Okay, I can't go into the details because it was kind of complicated and I'm
Uh-huh.
probably going to forget how exactly to do that. But getting my listings from Etsy over to Shopify was kind of a headache
Okay.
because I had to go in and edit Okay, so basically, I in Etsy you can export your listings and create a file that you
Yeah.
then import into Shopify. When
Okay.
that opens up into Shopify, it's not gonna be perfect. I had to go in and edit the text and the detail. Like I had to go in and manually edit every listing. There may have been a way to avoid that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's really, really, really important, like the cornerstone that all of this inventory syncing turns on, that you have to have right, is a SKU. So
Oh.
because there has got to be one piece of code that Sellbrite can use to, and I think this is going to be the same regardless of what app you use. Again, there's a lot out there. If people find a different app that makes more sense to them, that they like better, that's awesome. It's whatever one that you can understand and use consistently.
Mm-hmm.
But so I thankfully, from the very first thing that I sold on Instagram, my mom, who has been selling on eBay, was like, get yourself a spreadsheet and you keep track of everything you buy, everything you sell, how much you spend, all your expenses from the very beginning. I started a SKU, like item 1, 2, 3. I'm up
Yeah.
to over 1,200 now.
Wow.
And that has been like, if I had not done that at the very beginning, I just cannot imagine what a mess it would be.
Who knows? My
So
goodness.
yeah, yeah. So on Etsy, I always put the SKU in there.
Okay.
What is this? I don't even know what SKU stands for, but hopefully
Stock
people can
keeping unit.
stock keeping unit.
Yeah.
Um, so luckily all my Etsy listings, so I had over 100 listings when I moved over to my own website,
Mm-hmm.
had the SKU. And so imported my stuff over to Shopify. And then once the SKU was the same. And
Yeah.
then I like turned on Sellbrite, and Sellbrite was able to look at Shopify and see, okay, this is SKU 100. And then they looked at Etsy and they're like, okay, this item is SKU 100 too. And they matched them
Oh.
up. And then they're like, okay, now all those listings are linked between the two platforms
Yeah.
and we can keep the inventory and the pricing synced.
Okay.
And I will say Sellbrite, I was really impressed with their customer service because there wasn't, in my head, I just could not grasp how exactly I needed to go about this setup process. And they
Mm-hmm.
actually have a like text messaging support. So it's not a website, it's not an app, it's not a phone call where you have to be on hold. I'm like, I have kids running around. I cannot be on my laptop. I just have a question and I just need like someone to answer it.
Yeah.
And they were actually texting with me.
Really?
So I just gave them my information and they went onto my account and they could see things on the back end and
Yeah.
then tell me the steps I needed to take. And I was like cooking dinner while I was trying to text them. I was like, this is amazing. Why don't more people have this?
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds
So
better than Etsy support, quite frankly.
yeah, it's like so basic, but because I had emailed them and they were like, yeah, we can just text you on your phone. I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. The other thing I want to ask you about is Instagram. You're doing so well on Instagram. Your engagement on Instagram is really great, which is I think is a good sign. Because sometimes, like, I don't get Instagram, and so it's a mystery to me. But two things: one, how are you using well, you've talked about how you use Instagram to drive traffic, but how do you foster the engagement with your community on Instagram, to get people not just to watch your reels or what have you, but to engage with your posts, comment, and get involved.
Mm. I think that a big part of it is I'm not afraid to show my face and talk to the camera.
Ha, that's
I'm very extroverted and I take people along with me. And people know like they know Thrifty Mama because my mom has taken me to auctions and I have reels of her like giving me the lowdown on going to my first auction and talk. It's hilarious. You should look at it. It's like,
Oh.
I mean, and I'm doing stories and like Instagram stories and telling stories and showing people what taking pictures when I'm at an estate sale of different things that I see. So, and people have told me that they love going along with me places. And I'm also pretty open book. Like, I mean, I'm not afraid to reveal my sources, which some vintage people get really like hush hush about it. But you know, if I'm somewhere and you want to know where I'm going to tell you, because a lot of the places I shop from are small businesses and I want them to survive, and I can't keep them going all on my own.
Yeah.
And like, I need other people to shop here.
Yeah.
so that they're still here the next time I come to town. So I think that just being very personable with people has really helped. So, and it helps again that I have a lot of local people that like they pick up from my house and they know me, and so it's also like a big personal connection too. Yeah. So, I think also I have very little shame, so I'm not afraid to, like, if I do something stupid or silly, like, I'm not afraid to have people laugh with me.
I like that, laugh with you.
Laugh with me about it, you know, or about life. And I do try to stay positive and I'm not covering up the hard things, like lying or this like toxic positivity. So I think people kind of see like the good and the bad, but I try my best to not badmouth customers and to not badmouth Etsy, and not badmouth, like, just to not basically slander other people, because it's not good for anyone. Yeah. So yeah, I think that. Yeah.
You know, sorry, with Shopify and Instagram, they now have those shoppable links. Are you familiar with that? And have you considered? Yeah, have you tried it?
I have it set up. So I have shoppable posts. I don't think it's possible with Etsy shops, because I think you have to own your domain.
Yes, I believe so.
Honestly, setting that up was almost as hard as my Shopify site.
No way, really?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Okay, someone from Meta actually called me on the phone.
Oh wow.
Like, because I was majorly impressed, because I mean, I have a business account, so honestly they probably spend more time investing in business accounts than just personal accounts. But you basically have to connect your Shopify catalog, so your inventory on Shopify, with Instagram, your Instagram, Facebook, I guess, Meta business catalog. And it has to get approved, and you have to prove you own the website, and then you have to get each product approved. And I mean, if they hadn't called me, there's no way that I would have figured out how to set it up. That make it sound really seamless, but it was not easy. And so, but I did figure it out. And that's just, and if anyone has struggled with that, like, you're not alone and you're not stupid. It's really hard. But once it's set up, now it has been great. And the nice thing, and I probably should double check before anyone just runs with this, but Facebook was actually, I think, either through the end of the year or through June. Now I'm not sure which it is. I think it's through like June 2023 or something. They're charging 0% transaction fees on when things are purchased through your Instagram shop. So I actually have an Instagram shop. So you can choose, when you set yours up, you can choose two ways. You can either have the customer check out on Instagram, so they never leave the app, or they can be redirected to your website and they check out through your website. Right now, anyone who checks out through an Instagram shop, I don't get charged any fees, like no swipe fee, no platform fee, nothing. I think when that deal ends, it'll be 5%, which is still that's like 5% flat. So that's way less than Etsy. Because Etsy is at 9%, I think. If you add everything up,
yeah, it comes to just under 10%. Yeah.
And then also what was really interesting is they're running this deal for people who have never made a purchase through Instagram shops before. You can get 20% off, and Instagram pays the difference. And I think this is just through the end of the year. So they pay me. So if someone buys something for $100, I get $100. The customer only pays $80. I know. So I've been trying to encourage people like, guys, this is like a really good deal for you.
Yeah.
You need to buy through my Instagram. And some people are like, I don't trust Meta. And I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah. That's fine. Like that's totally fine. Like I don't care, as long as if you want to buy from me, I don't care. I'm just giving you this information because it could save you a lot of money.
Yes.
So again, yeah. So now I don't know if they'll keep that. And again, I guess this may not be true when this podcast episode goes live. Yeah. So just everyone look at the information, but it's just good to be aware that sometimes there are benefits to kind of working with what Instagram offers.
Yes. And just a side note, as you're listening to this podcast episode, we're actually recording this in December of 2020. So when you hear it,
22.
I'm
22.
Thank you, Whitney.
Sorry, I'm just double checking.
Yes. 2020. That is so crazy. I don't know why 2020 came out.
You feel like it's 2020.
I feel like it's 2020, really. We're recording this in December of 2022. So just be aware of that when you listen to this. Things might not exactly be the same. And they might be running a different type of promotion when you do hear this. So just FYI. You cracked me up when you said some people say, I don't trust Meta. I'm one of those people too. I'm like, I don't trust them. But
that's fine.
I still do. Yes. But yes, I know that when they try to get these new tools or new services off the ground, there are some incentives to being an early adopter or even just an adopter of the services. So I don't, I've done things like that before, even though I was wary, and usually they end up being okay and paying off. Like, I mean, I'm sure the FBI knows everything about me they need to know. So that's the way I think about it. Like,
I know.
It's all out there. I had another question for you. So what are some things that, and you said a lot, and it seems like, not that it seems like, but I like that so many things that you've taken the time to figure out. That's one thing I'm picking up on, is that you take the time to figure things out and to work through things and to learn. What are some things that you can look back at having done up to this point that you think were really key in setting you up to be successful, not just now, but going forward?
I mean, the first thing I think is relationships, especially in any kind of small business. Taking the time to make connections with people is so critical. And I have found that, and maybe it helps that I grew up in a small town. And so, I mean, I've lived years overseas and lived in some crazy countries and so I have some like street smarts, but I still have probably an innate sense of trust even in strangers, of like not being afraid to ask questions and strike up conversations and just ask people, hey, where did you get this? How did you learn how to do this? And that's a thing too on Instagram, I think, is relationships are so key. And there have been so many other Etsy sellers or vintage sellers who have been open and helpful with me. And it's like, hey, we're all in this together. Like, let's help each other. And it's interesting that whole phrase, community over competition. Like, I actually think competition is a really good thing. Like, there can be healthy competition where we can spur each other on to be better and then still congratulate other people on their successes. Like, me seeing you succeed at something shouldn't make me jealous. It should challenge me to do better, not so
Right.
that I'm better than you, but so that I can just be better for my customers.
Yeah.
And I don't know, some people don't get that. Like they feel, and this is very, very few people, but I have run across people that see my successes and they feel very threatened. And I also think it's a uniquely female thing too, that's a whole different conversation of like, we don't have to take competition personally. Like this is business and we can act. And anyway, so I just, encouraging other people and having those conversations is so important. And also I mean, I am very much like, when I get into something, I get hyper focused and absorb tons of information. I'm researching obsessively. Your podcast, I think I like was able to search all the vintage episodes and listen to all. It's amazing on Overcast. You can search within a podcast episodes. So I like found all the ones. Yeah.
Wow.
So like I use Overcast to listen. So I pulled up your podcast and then searched vintage. And so it pulled up all the vintage episodes for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
impressive.
I went through and listened. And then I looked up like, I don't know, SEO. And because that was another thing that I think was really helpful was figuring out SEO. And the nice thing is because I have a background in I've designed websites before, and I realized that SEO is a lot like hashtags on Instagram. I mean, it's all about how you file things. It's just about how do I take this item and fit it in all these different categories that it could apply to. That's exactly how hashtags work. And actually, that's another thing I think that helped me on Instagram is that I had a separate Instagram account that grew to a pretty healthy size. And while I was growing that one, I did an Instagram course with a creative entrepreneur called Me and Orla, Orla. So do you know? Oh yeah. Her podcast, her website, everything is so helpful. So I actually invested in, it's called the Insta Retreat, and it was amazing. Like, and I still have access to it. I need to take it again now that I have a completely different business, like just to take it with kind of a different set of eyes. But yeah, so I think being willing to take risks and invest in myself and my business, and then realizing when I've reached the point of saturation of okay, you just need to get up and do it.
Yeah,
like just do it. You just have to do it, because I do see a lot of people paralyzed.
Man, yeah.
And it is overwhelming, when there are so many options and so many different ways. And even with the different apps, like if you go onto the Shopify and you like type in Etsy integration app, and there's 50 things that come up.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Someone on Facebook, on this Facebook Etsy vintage seller Facebook group that I'm in, someone said they use Sellbrite and they liked it. So I'm just going to use Sellbrite. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so much of what you said has spurred a lot more questions in my mind. First of all, yes, I haven't done the Instagram course by Me and Orla, but I remember once saying in one of my Instagram posts, just expressing some frustration about not really understanding Instagram well enough and not knowing how to connect well with the people I wanted to connect with. And somebody on there, Rochelle Fitchett, she runs Pacific Crest Silver Jewelry, and she recommended that course, exactly this one that you've mentioned, because the lady who runs it, she's she's British or right? Yeah. Yes, I do remember that, and I remember looking into it, and like you said, reading up about it and getting kind of overwhelming myself. Not had nothing to do with her, but going down a rabbit hole of, okay, well, who should I learn from? Like you said, in that Facebook group where everybody has an opinion, and then you get overwhelmed by everybody's opinions. And of all the opinions I heard, that course by me and Orla was the one that I said to myself, okay, if I ever get serious enough about doing this, this is the one I want to do. Just because, you know, it was like, okay, this person said it worked. I can see proof in her Instagram that it worked. And now you're the second person coming along and vetting that course. So that's going in my back pocket, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now that the pound is so low with the currency conversion, I mean, it's a great great take advantage.
Yeah.
Of it.
Yes.
Oh.
I
No.
will, for whoever is interested, I'll hunt down the link to me and Orla's course and just put it in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself and see if you know, growing on Instagram is something you desire. Not to put another thing on everybody else's plates, but just for whoever is interested.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is, I don't know what the currency conversion, it was over $400, I know, but when people pay, they pay attention. And sometimes you have to buy the expensive course and invest, because if you spend that much money, at least that's how I bought a lot of online courses. Like, I'm always interested in this or that, you know, and how many times have I not followed through with that one? It's like, I spent so much money and I was like, okay, I'm in my seat every week, paying attention to what she's saying and learning and implementing it.
Oh, was it live?
Well, she does live groups. Yeah. So that's the other huge difference with this. Now you can sign up and you have lifetime access to the course material, which is in itself a huge value, but she only opens it like quarterly, I think. And then every week she has live calls and like mindset coaching. Cause she's a certified life coach now, I think. And so there is like a weekly live group call. I think it's a 6-week course. So yeah, it's just thinking about some people would do better with a self-paced thing, but like if you really need accountability in a group to go through it with, it's it's really, really helpful.
I've bought Whitney, I kid you not, so many courses. And now I know I need accountability. Like I'm not investing unless there's an accountability component, like, you know, whether it's live calls where you can join with other people who are taking the course or what have you. But I am really kind of over the whole log into the portal and, you know, pace yourself. I'm not that disciplined. I've just realized.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And I've actually designed an online course, and the first time we went through it, it was a live group, and just the energy, like you need to feed off the energy of other people who are discovering things as well. So yeah, it's really important.
What was your course about?
It was how to work with publishers in reviewing books, basically.
Wow.
So that's like a whole different.
I was gonna say that sounds like a whole different Whitney.
Well, it's really funny. Last night I was at a Christmas party and my daughter recently had to go to the ER for something, and it was fine, whatever. But you know, because I used to work in this pediatric ER, and I'm talking about the specialists and the procedures and all this and that, and a friend of ours who is he's an ER physician, but he met me after I quit being a nurse. He's like looking at me. He's like, Whitney, remind me, what do you do? And I'm like, I sell vintage and antiques online. He was just like, what? I was like, but I am a nurse. But 10 years ago, I worked in that ER. Like, it's kind of like this, I don't know if you know the Enneagram, but there's this meme for the Enneagram 7 that's like, so what are you going to do with your life? And they're like, it's a surprise. I'm like, I don't know. Every year it's different. Anyway. So that's a fun thing about selling vintage is there's always something new to like nerd out about. You can kind of specialize in different subcategories. And if you
Yeah,
get bored with that, you just move on to something else.
that actually was another question I had for you is how do you learn about the products you sell? Do you spend a lot of time digging in and doing research into what you're selling? One,
Yeah.
just, to educate yourself, but also your customers. And then also, is that part of your pricing strategy too?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have to know what I'm selling, and especially with vintage,
Mm-hmm.
even trying to figure out what era did this come from. One of my very first experiences. I mean, this was within the first 3 or 4 months of selling. I went to it's a creative recycling center store here in Kansas City where it's a nonprofit, and they sell secondhand art supplies, office supplies, school crafting,
Okay.
random recycled junk. Like, you can go and buy all kinds of, I mean, it is the coolest place, and all of their funds go to supporting homeless charities in the Kansas City area. It's called Scraps KC if anyone is in Kansas City. But I went there, and a truck backed up to the store to like unload, and it was a huge moving truck, and the door comes up, and I look in, and there are stacks and stacks and stacks of oil canvases, like paintings.
Ooh.
And I'm watching them unload it, and as they're unloading it, I'm like, this is good stuff. Like, I am a creative person, but I'm not a painter. But I have artists on my family. My husband's family
Mm-hmm.
has several artists, my mother-in-law. And anyway, and I've just kind of grown up again being exposed to art, and I'm also a very intuitive, gut driven person. So if I see something and my gut says get it, I'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not a ready, aim, fire type. I'm like a fire first and then figure it out later
Yeah.
type of person,
Uh-huh.
which is not 100% accuracy. I mean, I've had my mess ups, for sure. Anyway, so these canvases were coming off the truck, and I went to the manager and was like, can I look through these and buy these now? Cause I'm here. And she's like, well, normally we like to take them into the back, and then we're not going to have them out on the floor for another week. And then she's like, actually, there's so many, we have to get rid of some. So
Mm.
as they were bringing them off the truck, I was going through them, and I had to make split second decisions. I mean, there were probably 100 paintings. I had to make a split second decision
Wow.
as to which ones I was going to take. And so I brought home about a dozen paintings, I think.
Okay.
They were all from the estate of one woman. Her name was Shirley Coleman, and she was a local Kansas City artist. She had died several years before, and her family was finally clearing out her attic. And I mean, I just did a complete um, deep dive into her life, figured out where she worked, who
Mm.
she worked with. I talked to, of course, since my in-laws have artists in their family, I asked them, hey, have you ever heard of this person? And a friend of theirs had. And so I called and talked to her, and then I talked to her art instructor. And
Wow.
I mean, and just she had like was a poet, and she was an opera singer, and she painted, and all these things. Anyway, so it's just that. So then when I went to sell those paintings, first off, I kind of took people on a journey with me from
Mm-hmm.
the moment that I found the paintings. I was sharing them on Instagram, and I had people immediately messaging me about buying them. And
Mm-hmm.
so then as I was learning more, I was sharing that on Instagram and telling people what I was finding out. And then I even took the paintings to a local art restorer, because they were really, really dirty and musty, and they'd been in like a damp attic for years.
Mm.
And this art restorer was very kind and generous, and she like took the time to tell me how to clean the paintings and get them like sanitized, and to make sure the condition was okay and everything.
Yeah.
Side note, never use water on oil paintings. You just use rubbing alcohol
Oh,
on
tell
a
me you
cotton ball.
didn't.
Oh, I didn't. No, I
Oh,
didn't.
okay.
I'm just saying, I'm just like putting this out there. Like,
Yeah.
don't use water.
Okay.
You vacuum out the back, and then anyway. And so then when I went to sell these paintings, my audience was already primed. Like,
Primed. Yeah.
and I don't mean that in like in a
not a
bad
bad
way.
salesy way, but you
No,
had educated them and
no.
you had excited them about what you had.
Yes. And the paintings were gorgeous. If you scroll way back in my feed from like summer 2021, you
Your
can see, and I,
Instagram feed?
yeah, on
Okay.
Instagram. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Cause this was, they were all sold on Instagram, and I sold every single painting locally,
Mm,
and was able to, I kept one for myself, but I was just able to do that. And again, it's because I took the time to educate myself about the artist and about the medium, about cleaning them, about I had to like get a few of them reset in their frames. But
mm,
so so yes, with anything that I have, I mean, the internet obviously has tons of information. I'm
yeah.
in Facebook groups, like I'm in Facebook groups for Etsy vintage sellers, for American stoneware pottery collectors, for antique quilt,
Okay.
which actually has given me access to a lot of like really high end quilt sellers that have been
Mm,
doing this for decades. And I'm able to like post pictures and ask questions from
mm,
people about dating quilts and materials and fabrics and that kind of thing. And I mean, I'm a huge book nerd. And so books can be obviously hugely helpful with learning the history of things. And I've always, that's another thing with vintage, I have always loved history. Like at one point when I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist.
oh, nice.
So now I kind of feel like in some point I am,
Kind of
because
get to
I'm,
do that now. Yeah.
yes, yeah, I've dug through enough basements that I feel like a bit like an archaeologist. So yeah, that I feel like the more information that you can give someone, and the more educated I am, and I'm able to like talk about the history of the piece and why this is significant,
Mhm.
and what kind of people may have used it, where all of that just helps to inform people, and it does help you to have a higher price on an item because its value is
Yes.
higher, both objectively and in the eyes of the buyer
Yes.
themselves.
Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. Like if you come to me selling something and you know the inherent value it has, um and you know the history, and I think history does add to value, then yes, it makes sense that you wrap the price tag you put on it into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's another thing too, is like and this is a conversation I have with again, especially women, is you have to value your time put in this. Like
Yeah.
it kills me. And this is something I see more on Instagram than on Etsy, but um, people who are afraid to charge a premium or a higher or even just like an average price for their item. And this is something I struggled with too for a while, but it's like having the confidence to say, this is how much it costs. And
Mm,
it is my time is worth, like, is
this.
worth this much. I have
Yeah.
searched for this. I have bought it. I drove 30 minutes to get it. I spent
Yeah.
an hour polishing it
Yeah.
and photographing, all these things. Like, you have to be compensated for your time.
Yeah.
Just like, even if you're a maker, and you're making things, like the
Mhm.
same thing is true for vintage.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Thank you for reinforcing that, Whitney. Um, just really quickly, if you want to check out Whitney's shop on Etsy, it's Thrifty Whitney Shop. And then also her website is thriftywhitney.com. I just wanted to throw that in there in case someone wants to quickly check that out. Whitney, are there any features that don't currently exist on the Etsy platform that you would like to see?
Mm. I wish that Etsy was like Shopify and I could actually see where my sales are coming from, because Etsy will show you where your traffic comes from, like people walking into your shop, but
Yeah.
I can't tell which of those numbers are actually buying. So on Shopify, this probably has to do with, I mean, this has to do with cookies and all that. But on
Mhm.
Shopify, I can see this person clicked on my link on Tuesday from Instagram, and then Wednesday, they came back and bought something. And I can actually see what is driving my traffic. On Etsy, I cannot see, like, are my actual buyers coming from the search engine? Are they coming from ads? I can see that on if you're running Etsy ads
Mm-hmm.
or offsite ads, you can see that. Like,
Yeah,
and
that's
I've
true.
I've only done a month or two of ads. It just is not successful for me. So with ads, I can see, oh, this person clicked on this listing, but then they actually purchased another one. Well, that's helpful. But and again, this may be like this may seem like, why is this important? It's like, well, because I can have like 100 people visit my shop in a day and one person buys something, but did I bring them in? Did Etsy bring them in? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
I do wish that they gave us better data that we could, work with,
Work with.
because traffic means nothing to me unless people are buying stuff.
Mm. I like that. I should quote that. Traffic
Mm.
means nothing to me unless people are buying stuff.
It's so, I mean, I have I have items in my Etsy shop that have been seen like 300 times and they have like 50 favorites. No one's bought it yet. And then I'll
Ah.
have something that gets viewed like twice or three times and someone buys it. And it's like not even a cool something. Like it's not even, I don't even think it's that cool. And, or
Yes.
maybe it's sat there for 3 months and only been visited twice and then someone buys it. That's why I don't pull stuff from my shop.
Mm.
Um, like I'm just, someone's going to buy it eventually, I think.
Where do you send your items to live permanently? I'm assuming it's Etsy, right? Because you go your Shopify store, then trickle into Etsy, and then you just let them sit in Etsy until they sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Etsy and Shopify. Yeah.
Okay, both simultaneously. All
Yes.
right.
Yes. So they're both things are listed. I don't unlist them from my Shopify and then put them on Etsy. They're cross posted simultaneously. And
Okay.
I do have some things cross posted on eBay, but like we were talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
eBay has a limit on me right now where I can only have
Mm-hmm.
10 things listed at a time. And I just need to take the time to reach out to them and tell them, hey, like,
Yeah.
I'm getting no traffic because you're not letting me list new things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I need to get that fixed.
Okay. What advice would you give to a new vintage seller either coming onto the Etsy platform or somebody who wants to get into selling vintage, since you've done it multiple ways? You've done it on Instagram, you've done Shopify, and I shouldn't say you're doing Instagram, Shopify, and Etsy. To that person out there who also has an interest in selling vintage and one of a kind unique items, what's your best advice for him or her?
I would say first off, start your spreadsheet and track everything
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. And keeping yourself organized, like that's amazing. And don't buy the cheap stuff. Like if I would much rather, sell something. If I look at things, like it takes the same amount of time for me to list and sell something that sells for $15 as it does for $150. And even if that means more initial payout at the beginning, like I have to pay more for the cost for the item that I'm selling, but my time is the same. You want to increase your bottom line as much as possible. Like it, I don't, and again, I say things that's like, I don't mean to be judgy. I'm just very blunt. I don't
I like your
understand.
bluntness.
I'm very blunt. I just don't understand when I see people. And again, this is more on Instagram than not. And maybe it's people who are doing it for more for fun and more of like a profitable hobby. But I'm like, I don't understand how you are selling something for $8. Like even if you bought that for $1, like I don't. My time is very valuable. I have 3 kids. I have a husband. I have a home. I don't and lots of other stuff in life. I don't have time to sell something and only make $4 on it.
Mm,
Like that. So
yeah,
I think don't buy the cheap stuff because people can find the cheap stuff on their own. I
yeah.
mean, try to like sell what you really love, not just what's popular. And And that will help you niche down. I mean, I experimented in buying a lot of different variety of things, and I
Mm-hmm.
have definitely moved towards selling antique items, like probably pre 1960 as much as I can,
Mm-hmm.
and trying really hard to make like, and I don't do this every time because there's some really, really easy sells that I buy them because I love them, because they're beautiful and they make me happy. My gut says buy it. And so I still buy cheaper things, but I
Mm-hmm.
try to be selling things that are $30 and above,
Mm-hmm.
minimum, and also trying to, I mean, and this is just me getting into the really numbers nitty gritty because I think it's helpful. Like my goal is that my sell price is at least 5 times of whatever I pay for the item.
I was just going to ask, yes, how you
Be-
gauge that. Okay.
now, yeah, now that does not happen every time, because if I'm
Mm-hmm.
paying, that's that the more you pay for an item, probably the lower that ratio goes down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm buying something for $100 and selling it for 300, well, that's a $200 profit. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm really trying hard, because what that turns, I'm pulling up my spreadsheet because I actually have a spreadsheet. My husband is an engineer and he designed an amazing spreadsheet that calculates all of my Etsy fees and Shopify fees automatically.
Oh,
Every,
fantastic.
I have to like manually enter it. I still have to manually enter data, like the
Right.
sell price, shipping price, all of that.
But he
But I
has
mean,
all the formulas in there.
yes. And it kills
Nice.
me too to see like the difference between my Shopify and my Etsy fees. I mean, it's very interesting to sit there and like, because I have a pull down tab that says, okay, the payment was processed through, if I put Etsy and then I switch it to Shopify, like the difference is pretty significant.
Wow.
Anyway, but he also has like my net profit margin and my gross profit margin all calculated. And
Oh, so then it tells you what you should be charging.
yeah, so I
Oh,
mean, and I'll
nice.
say this, even if I'm selling something that's 5 times, my profit margin still may only be 60%, 60 to 70%.
Because of fees and
Because,
whatnot.
yep,
Yep.
because of your fees, you're not really making 5 times that. You're, and my inventory, my costs, my mileage, everything else. So you really, it takes, you really have to try to buy cheap, which is,
Yeah.
again, I don't follow my own advice all the time, but that's like the best practice.
Yeah. Does your husband sell that spreadsheet?
Oh my gosh. I don't mention it to him. One time I said, this is an entrepreneur brain, right? He was like sitting there trying to set up the spreadsheet, and I'm like on my phone saying, hey, babe, oh my gosh, we should sell this spreadsheet. This would be amazing. This would calculate. And he
Uh,
was just looked at me. He was like, you
yeah.
need to stop now.
No, yeah.
No, I'm not
For
doing
real.
this. And you just had, oh,
Yes.
that amazing spreadsheet group. If I had known
Yes.
about her spreadsheets, I would have just bought that spreadsheet because it's exactly what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Um,
you're talking about for anyone who hasn't listened, that was Sarah from Made on
yes.
the Common.
Oh,
And she's an accountant, and yes, she has put in so much thought into these spreadsheets. They're exactly made for Etsy sellers,
mhm,
and not just in general. Like, she has broken them down by region as well. So if
mhm,
you're in Canada, there are, different types of fees and payment structures, and same for Australia, etc. So yeah, do
mhm.
check out Sarah.
And she has one that's Etsy and Shopify together. So
Yes. Yeah.
that's what was so. But my spreadsheet was kind of based off of a free spreadsheet I got from someone called Not Your Dad's CPA,
Oh,
notyourdadscpa.com.
okay.
And he is a reseller and he's a CPA for resellers. So
Huh.
so it is free. So if someone is just like, I need a really basic spreadsheet to start from, that website, he has a lot of great free resources.
Okay, cool.
So
I'll track down his website and put a link to it in the resources section of this episode, so you all can check him out. I don't know why that kind of rings a bell in my head. I haven't used any of those resources, but that name, not your dad's CPA,
Mm-hmm.
maybe somebody has mentioned it. I don't know, but it seems to ring a bell in my mind.
I think he's pretty big, and he has a great Instagram and YouTube channel. So
Oh, maybe that's it.
yeah, I'm sure you've kind of seen him around.
Maybe. Yeah. Um, what was I going to ask you? Well, you kind of just answered one of the questions I like to ask about tools or resources that you use, and what you just shared here are all good. Unless you have some more to add.
The only other one that I would suggest that I use for bookkeeping is waveapps.com.
Oh, I like Wave. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like more people need to know about them because they're
Yes.
free.
Yes.
And so I use my spreadsheet for like the micro data management, like this item sold for this much. What was my profit? How much did I pay for shipping? Where did it? I mean, I have a lot of like micro data on there, but then Wave Apps is I'm tracking my gross numbers, money in, money out.
Yeah.
What's my cash flow? I just need to see how much I spent on inventory, total, like all those things. So I
Yeah.
have my business checking account connected to that. And so that is, you kind of need both of those pieces to be able to look at your numbers for your business.
Mm-hmm. For me, I've used Wave for invoicing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to like if I've had speaking engagements and get paid to speak, Wave is what I use for my invoicing, because like you said, once you connect everything, it just works so well. It works seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And their interfaces, I really enjoy using it because it doesn't hurt my brain.
Yes. And I know a lot of people who use QuickBooks because that's kind of what
Mm-hmm.
people tell you to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have had friends I've told about Wave apps and they have stopped paying for QuickBooks and just use Wave,
Yeah.
because if you have a pretty simple if your cash flow is pretty simple, you really don't need to pay for QuickBooks.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Whitney, do you have an Etsy shop shout out?
Yes. I
I
would like
figured
to.
you would.
I have so many. Like, who
Oh,
do I
go
pick?
for it. I don't
Oh
have
man.
any limits.
No. Okay. Well, Kelsey from The Antique Her, and that's The Antique HER, is
Okay.
she I sent her so many questions because she has an Etsy and a Shopify website.
Okay.
So she was so helpful
Mm.
on figuring out back end stuff and Instagram shop stuff too,
Mm.
as far as looking at all that. So yeah, I'll just shout her out for things. I mean, I don't know a lot of other vintage sellers who have done the Shopify integration.
Yeah.
Um
Because it's intimidating for sellers of one-off products.
it is, but you know what? I mean, it took me 2 weeks to set up my website, from
Mm.
like I'm starting it and I'm launching it.
Mm.
So I think if people just jump in and give themselves a deadline, if I'm going to get it done by this time, and then you launch it, even if it's not perfect, and you figure it out as it goes, like I guess that's my big encouragement for people who are trying to do it.
Okay.
So
Do it, launch it, just get it over.
yeah,
Just
just get it
get
over,
it
because
out there and then fix
uh,
it as you go,
yep,
basically. Yeah.
there's some things that won't make sense until you're actually doing it.
Yeah. Thrifty. I was going to say thrifty. That's how good your branding is.
I tried to come up with a different name when I opened my Etsy shop, because I'm like, this is, I don't know. It feels kind of like, is it too cheesy or
It's
whatnot? And I talked
cute.
to so many friends, and they're like, whatever you do, you have to keep your name in it. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
nothing else rhymes with Whitney. Like, so I just kept it.
Yeah. Yeah. Whitney, what is the best way folks can connect with you if they want to after this?
Yeah, I am very active on Instagram, and it's thrifty_Whitney on Instagram. So you can always send me a DM. You can also email me. Like my website has a contact form, and it's also wit@thriftywhitney.com. Wit was my like nickname growing up, and people still call me that. WHIT. Wit@thriftywhitney.com. So yeah, I love connecting with other sellers and like talking business and cheering people on. So I would love to hear from anyone if they have questions, or even if you're like, actually, I did it a different way and it worked better than the way that you said it, then come and tell me that too.
Yeah.
Because I also love learning new things.
Yes.
And doing things better.
Wonderful. So I will have links to Whitney's Instagram account, so you can follow her on there, go DM her on there with your questions. I'm pretty certain she will not mind at all. And I'll post her email in the show notes for this episode. I will also have links to her Etsy shop and her website. Again, check out Whitney's Etsy shop. It's Thrifty Whitney Shop on Etsy, and her website is thriftywhitney.com. Whitney, thank you so much for sharing your experience on Etsy and Shopify and Instagram, and what you've learned along the way. I think that's going to be really, really helpful for people who might be struggling with some of the things that you came up against. And thank you just for being so generous with your learnings and your knowledge and your time.
All right, thank you. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, I hope that it's helpful for people out there too.
I'm sure it will be. And I thank you for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. I will be back with another one next week.